For years and years and years, we've been commenting on the news. It's kind of strange to become the news. But before we get on to the main news story about how Ramon is currently the news, can I once again ask you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. We can't get there without your support. If you really want to support me and everything that I do here, you can always buy me a coffee. The link is in the description below. So before we get on to the usual stories, let's all start off in Blighty, where apparently school in Lincolnshire, now if you know anything about Lincolnshire, it's a pretty white part of the country, but apparently this school's been marked down by Ofsted. For those of you who don't know what Ofsted is this independent body that evaluates the goodness of a school. They basically come in and check whether the school's doing what it's supposed to do, whether it's performing. They give it a relevant standard, and everybody obviously wants to send their kids to a Ofsted excellence type school because it means that your kids are going to get the best education there, apparently. Well, anyway, a school in Lincolnshire has been marked down because, I quote, doesn't have enough black or Asian children in it. Yep, black or Asian children in England. Whatever will they do? Import more? Now, you see, the problem with this exact mentality is that we're often assured that there is no such thing as racism in England. And we all know it's actually perfectly legit to be racist against white people, because there is no such thing as against racism against white people. Remember, only a white person can be racist. We've all heard that. But you see, the actual problem becomes that England as a whole is getting rather fed up of what we would call illegal immigration. And this illegal immigration is being seen everywhere. Ultimately, these people tend to skewer certain parts of the population and make them think that life is slightly different from the reality of life. In other words, London must always have been full of foreigners, blacks in particular, and Asians and various other ethnic minorities who are now actually ethnic majorities because London is now a majority population foreign. How could it have been otherwise? And as such, the people sit there in positions of levers of power and start to create forms of laws or legislation and put policy down in place that would seem like, well, this is the obvious. You see, this ultimately ends up angering the local indigenous people. And this is an important news story because in local news in South Africa, Mbeki has come out and basically said that Gayton is a counter-revolutionary. Because you see, he says that much like England that is currently experiencing this xenophobia, South Africa is experiencing its own form of xenophobia. What he's had to say about Gayton completely misses the mark. What he actually describes is that Gayton has a degree of xenophobic Afrophobia, basically some kind of phobia of other Africans. And if you know anything about Gayton this is actually untrue. Mbeki says that this is very reminiscent of what's going on in England, where they obviously currently having a degree of disagreements with the illegal immigrants. And I use the word illegal immigrants because that's actually Gayton problem. You see, Gayton doesn't like illegal immigrants coming through into South Africa through the paper mache of a border. According to Gayton what that means is that people come here illegally, they're not really meant to be here, and it causes a number of problems. Number one, they can't actually work legally in the country, so they end up doing jobs that local people could do for half the cost. Because what are you going to do? You can't work anywhere else. The alternative is they engage in crime because you can't actually do legal work. And these illegal immigrants, to a large degree, don't care about the actual well-being of South Africa because they come to South Africa for purely extractive reasons. They want to come here, earn some rands, take the rands back to their country, and basically leave. If they leave South Africa in a worse place than it was in when they arrived, they don't care. And this ultimately is actually the argument that many British people have to the economic migrants that land up on their shores every day. People come there for extractive reasons. They come there as economic migrants. A lot of the time it's dressed in the language of, well, I'm coming there for asylum, for my personal safety. But that's very rarely the case. It's usually for economic reasons. And to a large degree, that's exactly what we experience in South Africa. Now, according to Gayton when South Africa already suffers economic problems, we already have a high unemployment rate, we can't really afford to take on the economic troubles of our neighbors. Those neighbors really should fix themselves, their own problems, before coming to us, because all they're actually technically doing is adding on to our burdens. Now, you may agree with him or you may not, but Gayton is ultimately correct to say that ultimately South Africans shouldn't be nationalistic and look after their own interests before helping everybody else is kind of folly. And you see, this unfortunately is the hallmark of Mbeki's diplomacy. We all know that one of the reasons that we have so many illegal foreigners in South Africa actually is because of the Zimbabwe situation, which Mbeki actually resided under. His quiet diplomacy of not getting involved with Zimbabwe when they were going through their own turmoil ultimately led to their economic collapse, and all those individuals came to South Africa to earn a living. So this Afrophobia that Mbeki describes is actually kind of his own making. To tar Gayton Mackenzie as being some kind of super hard right-winger actually betrays everything that Gayton argues against. In this instance, everything that Gayton argues against is 100% correct. Illegal immigration in South Africa is a problem, and it does need to be addressed. And coming up to the topic of the day, English Ramon. Because Ramon is in the news. Ramon's in the news because, as we told you yesterday, Ramon has gone to work for the Agricultural Ministry as John Steenhuisen's Chief of Staff. Well, this now has hit News 24, and John Steenhuisen has been approached for comment. And John came up and said, I don't really see what the problem with me appointing him is. Many individuals said that this potentially was the DA just using a degree of DA cater deployment because they knew and had a relationship with John for many years. Now, for one, will say, yes, we do know John, kind of. I mean, we kind of know all the politicians, including Herman Mashaba. We'll get back to Herman in a second. Obviously, during our time in Morning Shot, we've spoken to many of them because that's what we do. We do political news analysis and we speak to politicians. So according to John, the reason that he hired Ramon in the first place is because of his law degree and his years as a legal consultant, having to deal with paperwork in the courts. And according to John, Chief of Staff has to deal with paperwork and make sure it gets done correctly. So according to him, Ramon has all the qualifications needed to do the job. Now, I'm not here to defend Ramon. No, it would be easy because he was my former co-host. But with that being said, you see, the thing that gets me on this is that obviously News 24 has to call Ramon right-wing, as if that's kind of meant to mean anything. And apparently the biggest argument they have against Ramon is that he was on social media brandishing firearms. Not being funny, but so what? It's a God-given right to brandish a firearm. At the end of the day, he wasn't going around randomly shooting people. Ramon actually has a lot of training with gun safety, as do I. Lord knows what they'd say about me. With that being said, the reason that the story actually becomes almost insidious is because Herman Mashaba on Twitter came out and says that this is using racist policies because, Ramon must be racist because he says bad things about politicians. Yeah, I don't know either. But in any case, according to Herman Mashaba, it's just another example of it because even he's had an experience of racism from the DA. Now, the Kiffness waded in. God bless the Kiffness. He says, yep, looks like he has his fair share of being touched in his studio by Morning Shot. And this is 100% correct. He said, because for those of you who have ever watched our videos in Herman Mashaba, we always have the same comment to make. And that is, Herman Mashaba is nothing more than a race victim. All he's ever had to say about the DA is, oh, they're racist, and look what they did to me. They treated me so badly because of racism. And now apparently we've done the same. Now, actually, our biggest problem with Herman Mashaba is he didn't actually have any policies. I mean, I personally interviewed Herman Mashaba, and I did a commentary after it. And I asked him many questions about politics in South Africa, positions on firearms, position on global entities, and I'm not one to interrupt my guests when they speak. I let them speak. But even I got bored of my own interview with Herman because he didn't say anything. His main comment was, my whole policy is to keep the ANC out of power, and the DA is racist. And I must admit, the racist card gets boring. And if we also look back in hindsight, many individuals commented on that video at the time and said, potentially Herman actually has the most important comment to make in South African politics, and that is, get the ANC out of power. And for those of you who haven't been noticing, Action SA now says they intend to work with the ANC. So much for that policy. But one thing that they haven't dropped is the race victim narrative. You cannot constantly keep saying race victim, race victim, race victim. You're a millionaire. South Africa made you a millionaire. You literally run your own political party. You have seats in parliament, and yet you're still a victim. It's very, very boring. And this, unfortunately, was our commentary when we came down to actually interviewing Herman Mashaba. So does this make us hard-wing, right-wingers, extremists, and racists? Well, I would say not. Herman would probably say, yeah, undoubtedly, because you see, we clearly don't like him. And there's no reason why we wouldn't. I mean, it must be racist. What else would it be? The fact that he doesn't actually have a policy at all, and he's very, very boring and not captivating and doesn't seem to want to say anything apart from my opposition opponents are the worst, is dull, is tiring. Don't need this kind of politics. I'd rather vote for the ANC. Literally, I'd rather vote for the ANC. In any case, that's my view. Free to tell me what you think in the comment section below. In any case, until tomorrow.